Well, first of all, just to explain, we have decided to call our local nature recovery strategy development project Making Space for Nature in Kent and Medway. The idea being that it's hopefully a bit more of an inclusive project title and really explains what we're trying to do with our local nature recovery strategy. So the purpose of today's briefing is to go through what the LNRS is and how we intend to deliver it in Kent. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end, so if you could please hold on to them to the end, that would be fabulous. And I will kick off. So first of all, what is a local nature recovery strategy? Well, our local nature recovery strategy is basically a system of spatial strategies for nature and environmental improvement. And effectively, it will underpin England's nature recovery network. And the 48 strategies across the whole of the country will join together and create a national network of wildlife-rich places. There'll be no gaps and no overlaps. And together, all of these strategies will help deliver the government's commitment to end the decline of nature and support its recovery. And this is a real change in the way nature recovery is being addressed. It's very much a bottom-up approach. It's very much the government identifying that there is a need to address the decline of nature, but putting the responsibility for defining what that recovery should be at the local level with stakeholders. So the strategies will effectively agree what our priorities for nature's recovery is within Kent and Medway. And it will map where our most valued existing areas for nature currently are. And then really importantly, and this is the crux of the nature recovery strategy, map specific proposals for where we think it's important to create or improve habitat to deliver that nature recovery, but also to deliver wider environmental goals. And in that respect, we will be looking to include actions that not just address the requirement for nature recovery, but also help deliver nature-based solutions. So it will enable us to ensure that multiple benefits are derived from land management and the investment that comes along from that. The strategy will be used in a number of different ways. So first of all, it will identify the locations where creating or improving habitat will most likely provide the broadest benefits for nature and the wider environment, and therefore also for Kent's population. It will support the delivery of mandatory biodiversity net gain. So net gain is calculated taking into account what habitat is present, but there's also a spatial significance element in that. And the sort of strategic significance multiplier will in time be provided by the LNRS. So effectively, it will identify which of our land we really don't want to lose, but also where if there is to be biodiversity net gain delivered, where that should be targeted to deliver the greatest benefits, and there will be a multiplier that recognises that as well. The strategy will also provide a really important source of evidence for local planning authorities when they're determining their local plans, and also in future decision making as well. And the recent planning reforms legislation, the recent amendments last week to this has strengthened the requirement for local planning authorities to have regard to the LNRS. So this is probably the first time that, without sort of going through a formal adoption process at the local level, this is the first time that any biodiversity type strategy actually will have a mandatory role and a specified role within local planning. So it really makes sure that local plans take into account the value of our natural heritage, but also really make a difference within their local plans for nature's recovery. And then another role for the strategy will be that through channeling investment, it will encourage landowners and managers to take action to support nature recovery. So it will show those who, who are effectively the custodians of our biodiversity in Kent, just where they can target action and what that action should be. And it's also expected that investment coming out of central government and other green financing will be looking at the LNRS for where that investment should be directed. So the LNRS will feature a few things. It will include a statement of our biodiversity priorities. It will feature a local habitat map, which, as I said, will map what existing areas we have in the county that are important for biodiversity, but then also areas which could become of particular importance for biodiversity. And those areas will be, as I said, where the recovery or enhancement of biodiversity could make not just a contribution to nature recovery, but also to environmental benefits. So there will be a real focus as well on ecosystem services and nature-based solutions and the sorts of benefits that we get from a healthy and thriving natural environment. The strategy will also include a description of Kent's biodiversity, and we'll look at what opportunities there are to recover or enhance biodiversity broadly across the area. And finally, it will take those opportunities and turn them into priorities for recovering biodiversity. And with those priorities, there will be potential measures, effectively actions, where those priorities will be. And those priorities, like I said, will then go into that map and map where the areas will benefit most from those priorities and where the priorities will benefit most from the area as well. So the project will be overseen by a comprehensive project team. We've been very fortunate to have received a very generous amount of funding from DEFRA to deliver this. And we've decided to invest some of that funding in establishing some dedicated posts to help us take forward the work, to make sure that we have a really good resource to go out and work with all the stakeholders that are so vital to making sure the development of this strategy takes place. So I'll be acting as project manager for the next 20 months, ably assisted by Chris Drake as a project officer. And within the project team, we'll also have a support officer who is a new recruit to the team, who'll be providing all the sorts of bits and pieces that we'll need to keep the project running, and will no doubt be the very foundation of the project, as these sorts of posts always tend to be. Then we'll also have a land officer position. So this officer will be working with all of the landowner agencies, advisors, networks, farmers clusters, the likes of the CLA and the NFU and agents, and I've no doubt missed a lot out of that network of really important contacts with the landowning community. And that landowner will work with them to engage with as many and as broader and as varied farmers and landowners and land managers as we can in the county, and effectively make use of these really great relationships that are already established with this sector. It says vacant. We have actually offered the post to someone today, but just while we're working out the sort of nuances of the contracts, I will have to confirm that person in due course. We'll also have a local government officer, so that will be Katie Patterson. Katie will be working with all of our supporting authorities. So the regulations and guidance define all of the county's local planning authorities as supporting authorities, and places a duty on us to make sure that we fully engage with these authorities in the development of the strategy, to make sure that the emerging strategy works with their existing plans, and to also make sure that their future plans will be able to take on board what the strategy is proposing. So that will be a really integral role as that side of the consultation, the engagement that the project wishes to take forward. Kent County Council has also recently recreated our coastal and marine officer post, and we have recruited into that post Louise Lawton just recently, and Louise will spend the majority of the first sort of 20 months of her work at KCC focusing on the coastal marine elements of the local nature recovery strategy. So it's a it's discretionary to include marine in the LNRS, but as one of the biggest coastal authorities in the country, and one where our land is so inextricably linked to our coastal marine environments, we feel it's really important to include the marine environment and to take this opportunity to provide a strategy that really joins up those that interface between land and sea. So Louise will be focusing on working with the plethora of stakeholders that have an interest in coastal marine to make sure that we really tackle and really address all of the issues that face our coastal marine environments, and to devise some really strong priorities and associated actions with that. And finally, in the immediate project team, we're also hoping to second from one of our partners, someone to undertake on a part-time basis a rivers and freshwater officer position, very similar to the marine and coastal officer, to provide that specialised focus on this very complex habitat and network of habitats across the county. And again, we are actually interviewing for that position tomorrow, so I'm very hopeful that we will be able to announce the full project team early next week. And then finally, but not least at all, is our Natural England senior advisor, Karen Rigby-Foe, who many of you will have met previously. So Karen is appointed to support and advise the responsible authority and to make sure that we are meeting the regulations and the mandatory guidance as we go forward and develop the strategy. So that's the project team. And in terms of how we actually will develop this, so the development is very much, we have to follow, as I just mentioned, statutory guidance, and we have to meet regulations. So there's some element of things we have to do and must do, and then there is some elements of autonomy at the local level so that we can devise and define a strategy that works at the local level. It's one of the key messages that's coming out of DEFRA is that the strategy has to be deliverable. So for it to be deliverable, we obviously need to be working with our local stakeholders, and we also need to be considering any local sort of matters that could affect that. Development will be evidence-based and as I said, locally led and collaborative. And KCC is appointed the responsible authority, and we are developing the strategy for both Kent and Medway. That was decided some time ago that the two would be one local nature recovery strategy, which, bearing in mind how inextricably linked Medway's natural environment is to the rest of Kent, particularly on the North Kent coast, it absolutely makes sense to do that. And as I said, we're developing the LNRS under the title of Making Space for Nature in Kent and Medway. And I think a really important message that needs to come out is that whilst we are the responsible authorities, we are not solely responsible for the strategy. It will be a shared effort working across the board, and we really do want to see as many people involved as possible, and ensuring that everyone who wants to have involvement and have some input to the strategy gets that opportunity. So there are a number of steps that the guidance sets out as to how we should approach the development of the strategy. So I'm just going to run through now the broad approach that we are intending to take. Now, what I need to stress here is everything that is down here in terms of timelines and in terms of sort of how we intend to approach it is very much how we envisage it will work at the moment. This is the first time an LNRS has been developed, so there's no blueprint to follow. There were pilots and some great lessons have been learnt there that we can use, but I think as we go through the project, we might find things change. So please, bear in mind that this is how we envisage things will be going at the time being. I should say, in terms of, should timelines change, should our approaches change, anything that, any amendments that are made to our approach will always be reflected on the project website. So if you ever want to know where we're at with things, how we're doing things, and at what time things might be expected to be an output, please refer to the website, because that will be the place for the most up-to-date information on where the project's going. So step one is we need to map areas that are of particular importance for biodiversity. Now, this is a piece of work that is very heavily defined by the regulations, and we are only able to map 4 particular types of areas that are considered of particular importance for biodiversity, and those are our national conservation sites, so our protected sites, any local nature reserves we have in the county, our local wildlife sites, and also areas of irreplaceable habitats. So at the moment, that's as defined by the NPPF, but we are expecting that there might be a subsequent legal definition to bring in. So as I said, we're tightly bound, and that can only map, we can only map those areas. However, what we're going to do at this stage as well is also pull together a map of other sites that we know are of importance. So, looking at some of our key priority habitats, which are a really important resource, but might not be currently protected or fall into any of those categories. And other areas that we might know are important for connectivity, for buffers, and that sort of thing. And the idea is that map will play two roles. One is, because I imagine that a lot of people will look at the APIB and go, but this isn't on there and that's not on there. And we want to show that we are recognising that beyond the APIB, we do already have some really critical and important areas for biodiversity, but maybe they need more attention. And also to inform, so it will inform our our strategy area description, but also will inform our mapping work. So we will be able to, when we start mapping where we might want to direct our priorities for nature recovery, we can use those maps in terms of where we know particular habitat is, and like I say, particular areas that have already been identified as key to connectivity, for example. I should say that any map that's done under that other sites of local importance is can be added to, and is, it's not a fait accompli when we get to this stage. It's just a starting point to make sure that we pick up areas that we know are of importance to our stakeholders already, and we will be asking stakeholders to help us form that map. And so that work will be concluding early next year. The second step is mapping areas where nature recovery has been taken. Now, in terms of the statutory guidance, we're actually only required to do this during a strategy review and republication. However, we still will be mapping this work, even though we're not at that stage, just really because we feel our priorities and our action will be better informed by knowing what's already taken place, what's underway and what's planned, and learning from that as well. And, we have a huge amount of work that's ongoing in the county. So, and there's probably a huge amount of work that we don't know of as well. So it's really important to make sure that we have all of that up front so that we don't duplicate effort and actually can build on the effort that's already taken place. And again, that work will conclude January next year. And then the final area of work, which will conclude beginning of 24, is describing our strategy area and the biodiversity it features. And the guidance is quite helpful in describing what we should provide in that. So we need to look at the sorts of habitats we have and where they're distributed, what habitats might be of local and national importance, and any that support scarce or declining species. What the distribution extents of those habitats are, and if they've been lost or at risk of loss, species or groups of species for which we're of national importance, and in actual fact, in some cases, international importance, as we know we are. looking at what influences there are on species and habitats, and any opportunities that these influences may present, because obviously not every influence is necessarily going to have a negative impact. It may provide opportunities, but also thinking about those influences and how we might manage them, and how we might need to take that into consideration as part of our defining what our priorities are. And then also, as I said, a really important part of the strategy is thinking about what wider environmental issues we have within the county, and what the strategy could do to help address those. So part of step 3 will also include looking at the species recovery element of the LNRS. So we've just received the guidance on this. So apologies if this part of the presentation seems a bit sketchy, but we're still sort of trying to get to grips with how we might take this work forward. But effectively at this stage, the first stage of the species-specific work will be to follow in national criteria that has been defined by DEFRA and the other arm's length bodies. We will take our local species data and identify what species we have in the county that meet those criteria. And then we will also go out to our stakeholders and say, what other species do we have that we think are of local significance? And this will create what the guidance is terming our LNRS species long list. And we will take that long list and then, thinking about both current and future pressures, how those species might be affected by those. So that's the first stage of the species-specific work. Step 4 is where we're really getting into the crux of the strategy, and that's where we're agreeing what our priorities will be for the LNRS, and identifying what potential measures might enable those priorities to be realised. So it starts with a creation of a long list of potential priorities, and we will do that by consulting or engaging rather. Sorry, I must stop using the word consult. When I say consult, I mean talking to and working with our stakeholders to define what these potential priorities might look like. And then we will refine those priorities, because the strategy has to be deliverable. So we, as much as we might have like a massive long wish list of what we want to do, we need to start refining that to direct the resources that may be available and investment that may be available to where it will have the most effect, and will be directed to the most sort of in need areas, if you like, of nature recovery for the county. And national advice will be provided on how we select that, but I hope that we will have the opportunity to also influence that locally as well, to make sure that our local priorities are really drawn out, but we will re-advise on that in due course. So using that refinement, we will then agree what our nature recovery priorities are and start thinking about what measures will deliver those. And also at this stage, start thinking about potential areas where those measures might be directed, but that will just be to start the conversation going. And as I said at the bottom there, this is one of 2 areas where the stakeholder input is absolutely critical, and where we will be diverting a lot of our resources to ensure that's happening. And that will take place in the first half of 2024, and we hope to be at a stage by summer to have an agreed list of LNRS priorities. So it's at this stage that the second stage, of the species-specific work comes in, which again is similar to just been talked about, is refining that LNRS long list further. So the work will first of all look at what species our LNRS can best support, and that's using categories to prioritise provided by the guidance. And then that sort of shortened list will be grouped into habitat-based assemblages, looking at how any work on a particular habitat could actually help more than one species. So how sort of different species can benefit from same recovery measures. And that will create a pool of LNRS potential priority species, and there will be in that individual species and also species assemblages. And then we will go through a further refinement process, and that will consider a number of criteria that are provided by the guidance, which are sort of listed there. And I won't dwell on because I'm conscious that time is marching on. So finally, that will then lead us to a LNRS priority species list, and we will then develop potential measures for those species priorities, which will then be part of that broader LNRS priorities and potential measures listing. So the final stage of the LNRS development itself will be then to map where those priorities should be or could be delivered. So this is about identifying locations to recover or enhance nature. And this is, the strategy's main purpose. So we need to make sure that this map is, absolutely spot on. And it will be really critical to not only engage all stakeholders, but particularly to engage those who might be delivering these potential measures in these potential areas, making sure that we engage with those who own and manage the land, because it's those stakeholders that will be instrumental in taking forward the action. So with partners and stakeholders, we will map the areas which they believe could become of particular importance for biodiversity, or where recovery or enhancement of biodiversity might deliver a nature-based solution. And all of these areas, once they are finalised, will be collectively referred to areas that could become of particular importance. And we envisage that, as well as this being a stakeholder-led process, that we will also then do some sense checking of this in terms of, will this actually work on the ground? Does this enable connectivity? Is that location missing something? Do we need to provide extra elements within the map to make that work as a cohesive strategic area? So that work will take place in the second half of 2024, and will then lead us through to the consultation process. So we have to have quite an extensive consultation process. First of all, consulting the draft strategy with our supporting authorities and also our neighbouring responsible authorities, and then we will go out for a full 8-week public consultation, followed by another 4-week pre-publication review period, and then we will inform the Secretary of State of our intent to publish, which we hope will be done by May 2025 at the latest. So throughout the process, there are a number of things we want to be considering. So as I said, it's not just about nature recovery. Through every element of it, we want to be thinking how we can make any action that we take, or any action that we propose, how that can make a contribution to wider environmental goals, and how it can deliver the additional benefits that we all know come from a healthy natural environment. And that includes nature-based solutions. It includes looking at climate change. So not just how we might use our recovery measures to mitigate and adapt to climate change, but also thinking about how the impacts of climate change might affect the habitats and the species, and therefore the potential measures that we're trying to work with. And we all must always be considering, is this deliverable? We need to make sure there's a strong deliverability, and also, of course, with that deliverability comes opportunities for financing. So that is the extent of the project programme. And as I've said, stakeholders are absolutely key to this. By taking a partnership approach, we will enable a single vision for nature recovery to be developed, and we'll make sure that we have something that all parties have been able to contribute to and work towards, and essentially we hope will own that that vision. This partnership approach will also build and strengthen local partnerships that will be so important to that delivery. So, one of the things that we're being told quite regularly is that we need to engage the not the usual suspects. We need to work beyond our conservation organisations. We need to, be working with those who own the land, that manage the land and farm the land, and other bodies that we might not normally think of could play a part in this. So it's really important that we use this partnership approach to build new relationships and strengthen existing ones that will be so critical to when we then take the strategy from a vision into a reality when we start delivering. So consequently, the project will work with those that own and manage the land. We will work with those that influence how biodiversity is protected and enhanced. We will work with those that inform and make decisions, and also those that use and depend on nature's services. And so effectively, that includes a massive breadth of stakeholders. And it's only by being informed by stakeholders' priorities and also their data, information and knowledge that we can really deliver a strategy that represents a feasible and, that important word, deliverable plan for joined up action. So there will be a number of stakeholder engagement routes, and these will all allow, we hope, as many stakeholders to input to the development of the strategy as possible. We have a very strong delivery structure, so we have governance with a governance board, and then we have two areas of steering for the project, which is delivered through a delivery group, which is effectively the steering group, but also a sort of a group that sits aside that, which is all of the supporting authorities. So we're making sure that the supporting authorities are really tapped into the steering of the development of the strategy. Then sitting underneath the steering side of things are a number of technical advisory groups that will give us the expertise and the knowledge to really make sure that the work is done to the very best standard and give us that scrutiny and expert input that we need to do that. And one group missing from that now is a species recovery advisory group that we're going to put in there, because the species work is now quite technical, and we want to make sure that we are doing it to the best of our abilities. And then sitting below that will be a number of stakeholder engagement groups. Now, these have just been created to enable us to manage the stakeholders into groupings. How they actually play out in the process of the project will really be determined by how the project plays out. So we envisage in the first case, when we are trying to define our priorities, that we will do this around areas of common interest. So that largely will probably fall to stakeholder interest groups. But as we go forward and start sort of refining those priorities, and at the very least, as we start mapping, we really hope to bring those groups together to help us map and identify where those priorities will go. But it really will be sort of quite a fluid approach to how we engage stakeholders in that structure, what structure we use to engage stakeholders, rather. So I won't dwell on these because I've been talking for a long time now, but they will be in the slides that we will hand around. So as I've said, the board will provide political and strategic oversight and governance for the development of the strategy. And the delivery group will provide the technical and sectoral advice required to steer the preparation, with the supporting authority group sitting alongside that, providing the right oversight and governance that's required. And then we will have the technical advisory groups that will provide insight, skills and guidance and expertise into the project. And then the stakeholder engagement groups, which are the really key part of the structure, the delivery structure, to enabling a really comprehensive, broad engagement of everyone that we need to be seeing getting involved in this work. And the engagement groups are open to all, and there is a register online for you to indicate which groups you're interested in, and we will also be sending out a registration email to all of our stakeholders this month. As I've said, the website is a really critical part of our project, and it will be where we hopefully engage with as many people as possible, beyond what we're actually physically capable of doing in terms of time constraints. It's a real opportunity for us to properly engage with as many people as possible. And that's where I would, say to you, if you have a question about where we're at the project, best to go to the website first, because it will be updated on a weekly basis, and it will be the place to go to for not only information but all of the project outputs as we progress through the stages. We not only want to, we have to make the process of developing this strategy as transparent as possible, and the website will be the place that we make that happen. We have a launch, which if you haven't registered for, you might want to hurry up, because I believe we're only about a dozen spaces away from being full on our capacity, which, when you bear in mind, is 150, is absolutely fabulous. And I'm really pleased to see that there is so much interest in the strategy. But it should be a really interesting event. We will have presentations from the Making Space for Nature partners, looking at why we need the strategy, what action could underpin. So looking at some of, like I was saying, there's so much really great stuff already going on. So looking at what action we can learn from, and the sort of action we want to see on a broader basis across the county. And then looking at the benefits that that nature recovery will deliver. And of course, importantly, it will also be an opportunity for some of our new partners, some people that we might not have physically met yet, but to come together and start talking about what they would like to see for Kent and Medway's nature, and what aspirations they might have for that. And that is the end of the presentation. As I said, that's the website for your first port of call, but of course we do have an email address, and you're welcome to drop the project an email at any time to ask questions.